I have to teach a lesson and I have no idea how to organize my information. Is there some sort of framework that I can use in order to teach anything? Ladies and gents, my name is Brandon Stover. I'm the founder of Plato University, and today we're going to cover the what, why, how framework, the framework that I use to develop any of the Plato University lessons and honestly to teach anything. In a previous video, I covered the 3 phases of learning: explore, engage, and execute, which can be used to structure an online course or some sort of learning experience. Now, this framework is what's used at the macro level in order to organize lessons in a course or structure a 60-minute live workshop. However, there's a similar version that can be used in order to structure your lessons, to do this on the micro scale. And that version is called the what, why, how framework. I'm going to give you an overview of the framework, and then we'll dive into each portion and discuss how it's applied. So the what, why, how framework, implied by the name, has 3 parts: what, why, and how. What is the topic, or what are the parts of the topic? Why is it important to the student, and how do you apply that knowledge? If you've seen the video on the 3 phases of learning, you may recall that it was based on the classical Greek trivium, which included grammar, logic, and rhetoric. The what, why, how framework also maps onto that trivium, but we'll discuss that more in just a moment. But first, why do you even need a framework? A framework allows you to organize your thoughts in a way that's easily understood, so you can transfer the knowledge that's in your head into the heads of your students. A framework also allows you to move within any topic with ease and be able to teach it. You have a way to structure your information, so you may be presented a large swath of information on a topic that maybe you're not a complete expert in, but because you have a framework that you can plug in that information to, you can more easily teach that information. Now, you may use whatever framework works best for you. However, I find the what, why, how framework easy to remember and widely applicable. So let's discuss how to use the what, why, how framework by looking at each portion of the framework. So we're going to start with what. What is all the foundational concepts and facts that are required in order to gain a full understanding of the knowledge set? In the classical Greek trivium, the what is related to grammar, which are the words and definitions and sentence structures that make up a language. If we were putting together a puzzle, the what is all the individual puzzle pieces, with the puzzle representing the entire knowledge set that we need to know. Now, the reason that including the what is important in your lessons is because without all the parts and pieces, you don't gain a full understanding of a topic. You're lacking that clear picture of what the puzzle is. Those parts also become building blocks for creating relationships between concepts and functions that can be applied later. So to deliver the what in your lesson, ask yourself, what are all the pieces or concepts that my students need to know in order to apply this information? Asking this question is going to tell you what's relevant out of a knowledge set. Sometimes knowledge sets are so vast, and the reality is your student doesn't need to know the entirety of it. They only need to know what's useful for them to actually applying later. So in this process of delivering your what, you're defining terms, you're collecting definitions, descriptions, and illustrative examples of those concepts. Anything that's going to help the student get a picture of what this topic is. For example, if we're learning pharmacology, the what are all the drugs available to use. However, at this point, we don't know why we might use a drug over another, or how it's administered and applied in a particular patient's context. Unfortunately, this is where a lot of education stops. We memorize what things are. We don't learn why or how to apply them. However, if you're watching this video, you're going to be different. So let's move on to the why portion of our framework. The why portion is answering that critical question the students have of why is this information important? Why does it matter to me? The why portion creates relationships between concepts, and most importantly, the relationship of those concepts to the person that is learning them. In the trivium, this was known as logic, which creates relationships between words and sentences within a language. Words make up sentences, sentences make up paragraphs, paragraphs make up an argument. If we're putting together that puzzle, the why is how those puzzle pieces are shaped, because they create relationships between the puzzle pieces and how they fit together. It's important for this particular puzzle piece to be squiggly because it's going to fit together with this squiggly puzzle piece over here. Now, if you don't explain why something is important to the student, they're more likely to forget it. Our brain is a caloric hog of energy. It spends a large amount of energy on filtering what's relevant for its survival and what's not. If the information you're teaching is not relevant to that student, the brain's going to kick it out. It's designed to do that. So to deliver the why in your lessons, ask yourself, why does the student need to know this? Why is it important to them? How does this information affect their life? In the process of answering those questions, you're going to define reasons, diagram relationships between concepts, and collect explanations, stories, and emotions that are going to better make this information relevant to that student. If you're learning pharmacology, the why might be all the different ills and ailments that a particular patient has, the cause and effect relationship of drugs, the side effects, how a particular drug reacts with another drug that a patient may be taking, the price of drugs, what drugs might be banned, the efficacy of drugs, and even that particular student's stories about why they started studying pharmacology, which may be linked to different medical problems that people in their family had, or a particular instance of not wanting to serve some sort of drug. All of these will be relevant to that student and their ability to apply the information later. Now, sometimes education will give particular reasons for why information is important. However, that explanation is not always convincing because it often lacks that connection with the internal motivation of the learner. Most people learn things because they want to do something with that information. They want to apply it and change their life in some way, which moves us into our next portion of our framework, which is how. How covers how a particular knowledge set is applied in order to achieve some sort of outcome that's relevant to the learner. In the classical trivium, this was known as rhetoric, where people are applying language in their speech in order to achieve some ends. In our puzzle example, the how is the action of putting the puzzle pieces together in order to achieve the picture that was on the puzzle box. We've already briefly touched on why having the how portion in your lessons is important, but let's discuss it a little further. Knowledge is irrelevant and useless if we're not applying it. Although a specific context of how information may be applied can change, and therefore making it hard to describe exactly all the steps that are required to apply a certain set of knowledge, if you don't at least give a few examples of how information is applied, students are not going to have a place to start the application in order to practice it and then maybe apply it in different situations later. And knowledge that's consumed and not used is eventually forgotten. Remember, the brain is trying to kick out anything that's useless. To deliver the how in your lessons, ask yourself, what outcomes do my students want to achieve, and how can this information be applied in order to achieve those outcomes? During this process, you're outlining steps if possible, laying out a process for actually applying the information. If that's not possible, then you're going to want to provide recommendations or tips for application. And you want to be able to apply this information in a variety of contexts. So you might give a few examples of what those contexts are. If you're in X context, you're going to apply it in Y way. If we're learning pharmacology, the how will be the way that the drugs are administered in a particular patient's context. The patient has these sorts of symptoms, we're going to give them this drug, and they're in the hospital, so we're going to do it through IV rather than oral administration. Now, education often shies away from the how portion of the framework because it's hard in order to come up with all the different contexts that knowledge can be applied, and we have the problem of transfer, of learning something in one particular situation and being able to apply it in another. However, you can increase the likelihood of that transfer by having them practice in a variety of situations of actually applying the knowledge and helping them understand the foundational principles behind that application. So returning back to the what, those foundational pieces, and the underlying logic for why we're applying it this way. Doing that gives them the pieces for them to be able to apply it in different situations. They can understand, okay, if I'm going to apply this information, I know these are all the pieces I have available in my toolbox. And if I understand the why, well, in this context, something is happening and it relates to that why. So it may be appropriate to apply this knowledge here. And that is why it's so crucially important that you have all three pieces and you don't forget any. So let's bring this entire framework together and talk about if you're sitting down right now to write a lesson, maybe for a video like I'm doing here, about how you would go about applying this framework. I've already described this some as we've gone through each portion, but let me just give you a quick, easy breakdown right here. So first thing I'll do is open up a Word doc and I'll create an outline of all the what's, all the concepts that I'm covering for this person to be able to apply this knowledge later. In this particular lesson, in this video right here, the what's were the framework, the overview of the framework, and then each particular portion of the framework, the what, why, how. Next, under each one of those concepts, I'm going to write the words what, why, how. These are basically going to be my subheadings of that portion of the lesson. In the what, I'm going to define that concept. In the why, I'm going to define why it's important. And in the how, I outline ways that this information can be applied. As I'm filling in each portion of the what, why, how framework, I'm providing illustrative examples in order to further explain a point. So in this video, we use the example of a puzzle, we use the example of pharmacology, and we even used a little bit of a history example, bringing in the Greek trivium, which the framework is based off of. The reason we're using multiple examples is because one may relate better to you, and another may relate better to somebody else. I'm trying to take multiple swings at helping you to understand the information. So no matter what example resonates with you, you're still gaining an understanding of the what, why, how framework. And that's it. It's really that easy. Every lesson that I've created uses this framework. Now, some are far more complex and go in much greater depth in each section, and you wouldn't be able to particularly see it's the what, why, how framework. However, the overall structure of that lesson still follows this framework. So this works for a 5-minute lesson all the way to a 60-minute lesson. Now, this framework is so easy, I believe anybody could use it. However, if you have some particular nuances to what you're teaching, or just need a little bit of extra help with applying this, let's schedule a call together. I can help you turn your wisdom into actionable education. Let's build something great together.